I'm an AI implementation engineer. I help small businesses use practical AI systems to improve operations, client experience, and growth. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Axel Mayhover, founder of Ideal Wealth Grower. Dr. Axel helps people build passive income and move towards economic independence through residential real estate investing. Through Ideal Wealth Grower, he mentors investors using step-by-step approach designed to help people buy back their time and build long-term wealth.
Yeah, thank you, Hyperlife, for having me. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm glad to have you here. And I think this conversation will be valuable for a lot of people, right, who want to invest, professional entrepreneurs, and anyone who wants to understand how residential real estate can really become a path for freedom, right? So for everyone listening to today's conversation will focus on residential real estate, practical path towards passive income and time freedom, and probably technology and how AI may help real estate mentors and investors improve education, follow up, ideal review, community support, right? So, Dr. Ese, let's start with your story, right? Before we get into real estate investment, can you share your story? How did your journey lead you to Ideal Wealth Grower?
Yeah, so as you can see, for those who can see the video, my first life, I always say, or my first career was basically in the military, getting the opportunity to fly fighter jets for 22 years. And I did that. And when you're in the military as an officer, you just automatically get moved around quite a bit. Right? Like every 2 or 3 years, you have a new station. And depending on what it is, and in my career, it was quite unusual because in 1995, I got the opportunity to leave the German Air Force and join the US Air Force. So that also meant new locations. But in general, when you are in the Air Force, and you get moved around every 2 or 3 years, each location has a little bit of specific circumstances. In some places and bases, they have lots of housing available. And if you get stationed there, you have the option, and it's also a matter of rank, obviously, but you have the option to live in what's called base housing. And then there are some other locations where they have a dedicated area where people that work on the base can live. Some people, it's like a little ghetto, so to speak. And then in other areas where they basically say, okay, you can live anywhere in the community. And most people rent when they live in the community, but in some cases, it is also feasible to buy. So just because that I always had a little bit of a question to answer, is it on the base? Is it off the base? Is it for rent? Is it for ownership? Just so, yeah. And then after I retired from flying with the Air Force, I got recruited into a software company in Santa Barbara, California, and did that for about 5 years, went to university to get a graduate degree and a PhD and stuff like that. And ultimately in 2005, I started my first own business. It was basically, and it still exists, it's a consulting company. And shortly after that, I started realizing, in the military, you're part of a community, but you're also protected financially. And when you for a company, they have like retirement plans and 401k plans and stuff like that. So there's a certain level of protection where you put money in and they put money in and you can grow. But when you're on your own, when you're basically self-employed entrepreneur, your own business owner, you don't have that. So for me, the question became, okay, if I don't have that externally anymore, what can I do myself if I don't really want to work forever? The whole concept that I later developed for Ideal Wealth Grower came later, but between about 2005 and 2008, I became aware I have to do something myself. And so I started researching and studying and basically realized that a lot of successful people sooner or later invest in real estate.
So that since 2008, am I correct?
Well, like I said, that's when I did the research, and then Ideal Wealth Grower was founded in 2015. But between 2008, 9 and 2015, I started investing myself for my family. I had originally never had an intention to turn that into a business. It was just to say, okay, I have my consulting company and I want to do something to protect my family. Now, you have me today here on the podcast. You probably can imagine I'm somebody who likes to talk about stuff, a little bit of a chatterbox. And so when people, when people ask me, hey, Axel, what you up to? What are you doing? What are you into? What are you looking at? I told them, I'm trying to get financing. Well, I'm looking at this property in Ohio and I'm not quite sure if we're going to invest in Iowa, and so people like, what the heck, what is he doing and so forth. Then let's say you meet somebody 3, 6, 9 months later and they say, hey, last time we met, you told me about this thing. Did that actually go anywhere? Right. And oftentimes I said, yeah, I got the house and we got the tenants in, I'm collecting rent and stuff. And so sooner or later, more and more people said, you're always talking about it as if anybody could. Can I do that too? And I always said, yeah, absolutely. It's not easy, but you can learn it and you can do it. And people said, would you help me? And I'm like, yeah, obviously, no problem. I help you. And then at some point, my wife stepped in and said, hey, do you realize you're helping all these people all for free? That's really not right. And it's your time and my time in a way. Don't you, that has some value that somebody should pay for that? And at that point, I said, okay, you're right. I mean, just looking at my calendar, it started getting a little insane, not only for the money, but also for the time. And I also felt that people kept asking me, how do we go about? How do I have to imagine this program go? When I start working with you, what are we going to do? And so I basically took a break over the summer, kind of like this time of the year, and said, okay, let me take 2 or 3 months and really all put it together, put a website together, put a name together, put a real system together. And that's how Idea Wealth Grow. And that was in 2015, how that actually started.
You often, so I know you talked about sometimes I see you right talk about time, freedom, and economic independence.
Yeah.
What do those ideas really mean to you personally?
Well, one of the things is if you really, really go super big picture from an investing perspective, you can invest in 3 different kinds of things from a
Right.
goal setting perspective. The first thing you can say is I invest in stuff where I put a certain amount of money and I hope it grows in value. And if I sell it, I have more money than before. That would be like typical stock market, right? The other thing you could do, kind of like on the opposite, you could say, okay, I invest in something that generates cash flow. Every month I get some income and I know it's not going to grow in value very much, but my benefit is I'm getting money out of it on a regular basis.
Right. Right.
And that would be real estate that you basically own and you rent out and somebody lives in it and pays you rent. And then the third one would be to say, is there a way to find a combination of both? Real estate that pays you something and also increases in value. Now, in this day and age, I can say since 2022, that I have not found very many of those to exist, but they used to exist before when I first started. You could invest in rapidly growing areas and still make good rent and still have a little bit of cash flow. Now, this time freedom point idea is basically to say, okay, most people, when they start, they have some kind of a job. Or even if you started a business, you have work to make income. And in a sense, that is another way of saying you're using time in exchange for money. And the ideal of the time freedom point is almost like literally like the word says, you want to reach a point in the future where you have passive income coming in every month enough to cover all your costs, because then you have the freedom to do with your time what you want and you don't have to exchange it for money anymore. Right. So that's kind of like the goal to say, if I'm here right now, how can I change my investing pattern or my investing behavior to ultimately have assets that pay me every month so I don't have to work for the money anymore.
Wow. Wow, that's a good concept. So when we talk, when someone hears the name Ideal Wealth Grower, right? What do you want them to understand about your mission?
Well, the first statement I always say is Ideal Wealth Grower has obviously a mission to get you to financial independence, but it's also 2 abbreviations mixed together. The first one is ideal and the second one is grower, and what we want to accomplish together is wealth. So ideal stands for the I stands for income. We want to generate income from our asset. We also, if possible, would like to have a tax benefit that's called depreciation. So just to explain that real quick, what does that mean? If you and I were to start a business and we need a machine and we buy that machine, the government would say, okay, you're investing in this machine, but everybody knows this machine is not going to last forever. Let's say we were to say that machine lasts 10 years. then every year for 10 years, we can write off 10% of the value of that machine. That's called depreciation. Now, in real estate in the United States, they say a house, and you have to take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because it doesn't really one on one, a house doesn't fall apart, but they're basically saying for the same purpose, a house lasts 27 and a half years. So you can
Right.
write off the price. If you and I, we buy a house for $275, $275,000, we can write off or depreciate every year for $10,000. That means your taxes go down by $10,000, the taxable income. So I is income, D is depreciation, E is the equity, right? For
Right.
example, we put a tenant in our house, but we have a mortgage on the house. Now the tenant gives us rent. We take part of the rent to pay the mortgage. And when you look at your mortgage statement, you can do this if you have a mortgage on your own residence. You see, you pay part of the payment is for interest, and part of the payment is principal, basically paying back the money that you received.
Right.
While that principal amount is basically equity. Because if you were to sell the house, then you wouldn't have to give that money back because you already paid for it. So E is for equity. Then we have A is appreciation. I said that earlier, right? Like, so you're buying a house and you say, okay, ideally, I would like it to increase in value every year. And then the L for ideal is leverage, because you could theoretically go out and say, okay, I take $275,000 and buy a house. But from an investing perspective, long term, it makes more sense to say, I only need to put down 20%, which would
20%.
be like about $55,000, and I get the rest from the bank. Now, I'm making the example a little quicker for your audience to understand, to go along with the
Right.
math. Let's just say our house is 200,000, right? We put 20% down, which is 40,000, and the house increases 3% in a year in value.
Yeah.
That's not much, but 3% is
Yeah.
at least a little. So on 200,000, that would be $6,000, but we only put 40,000 in. So $6,000 appreciation on $40,000 put in is 15%. We haven't done anything. We haven't done any depreciation. We haven't even calculated any income. Just because of the leverage, we're already 15% in the good, right? And that's with 3% appreciation. So that's why leverage is so powerful. And it's also one of the things why people oftentimes underestimate real estate, because they look at real estate like stocks, right? They say, should I buy a house or should I buy Amazon? Well,
Yeah.
but at Amazon, you cannot depreciate. At Amazon, you cannot do leverage. At Amazon, you cannot get a mortgage, and on, right? So that's a big difference. So that's ideal. Income, depreciation, equity, appreciation, and leverage. Right. So that's that part of the concept. Why residential real estate? And then grower is basically, what do we do when we actually have our sessions in the mentoring? And I had to learn, and this comes originally from a book called Performance Coaching from John Whitmore. He wrote that for businesses. And I looked at that and I adapted it because that book, the system inside says grow, use grow. And I looked at it and I felt for what I do, it needed a little more. That's why it's called grower. Now, obviously, we also want to grow our money and our assets and stuff. But what does grower stand for? The G stands for we want to set a goal. Right? If
Right.
you and I were talking, I would say, Hippolyte, how much money per month on average do you have to pay for everything? For food, for vacation, for the kids, for clothing, for car? How much is that? Just throw out a number.
Well, we'll just throw it, let's say $1,000.
Okay, $1,000. Well, I want you to live a little better. Let's say $3,000. Okay.
Let's say 3,000.
Yeah, 3,000 a month is what we're saying is our goal number. And we want to look at, okay, what is your current reality? How much money comes in from your investment every month right now?
We could say if we're spending 3,000, let's say 3,500 comes in.
500. Yeah, okay. So that means we have a $2,500 gap, right? So then we're going to look, and this is how our sessions go in the beginning. We say, okay, what opportunities do you have to get to more money coming in without you having to work on? What kind of obstacles are in the way? So we are GRO, right? So then the W is to say, okay, Hippolyte or anybody else who is in the system would say, what will you do? What actions will you take so that you can get closer to your goal? And we write that down. So now off you go and you take those first actions. Now that doesn't mean you go out and buy 5 houses, but there are certain things one of those actions could be to say, okay, Axel told me on a map, where are the regions in the country, in the United States, that are currently good places to invest?
Right.
And then you look at them and you do Google Maps or you use some AI or whatever to find out, okay, which one do I like the most? And, why would I pick one over the other? And now
Right.
we meet again 2 weeks later, and I would say, hey, Hippolyte, what was your experience when you researched all these different locations? You're going to tell me what your experience. And then the next, and this is the E, and then we would get to, okay, I would say, Hippolyte, what were the results of your research? Did you land on a particular location and why? And let's say you landed on Miami. You like Miami the best for some reason, right? So in the beginning, when we did our first session, we said the goal is to get $2,500 a month. Now you said the result of my research is I want to invest in Hawaii. And I would say, okay, Hippolyte, then we need to change the goal because Miami is a market that doesn't give any cash flow. So if you really want to go to Miami, you can't have cash flow, even though that was your original goal. So the result of your decision where you want to invest impacted your original goal. And that's why this becomes a cycle, right?
Cycle,
Like
yeah.
we're checking every time we get together, like every 2 weeks or so when we have a session on average to say, okay, what's the goal we're going after under the big umbrella of the big goal? What is our current reality, obstacles and opportunities? What actions can we take in 2 weeks? What were the results and do they impact the goal? So that's the grow up.
Oh.
Right. And so we have that initially. And then the second thing is that when somebody says, okay, I want to join your program, that I help them to initially set up a dedicated company purely for the purpose of investing, to make it professional, to make it a business and not just like a hobby.
Right. Like a hobby, yeah. So, I mean, based on what you're saying, that's a very detailed, thought out process, not only with the name, but it looks like you went out of your way to get everything done with the weddings, with the name and everything down to the T. And everything means a lot. Like if somebody is they dedicated into the program, they're going to know that every letter means something, right? Every letter in the word, they mean something. So in what is the process if somebody has to sign up to your program? What's the process? Can you share probably a story where you help someone, right? Let's say from the process of signing up, where you help them, a story with where real estate actually investing or a mentorship change someone's financial direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, signing up for the program is very easy. You just go to the website and you find the space and you click and you put in your credit card and then you sign up. And the only decision you have to make if you want to pay all at once or if you want to pay in monthly payments. The program lasts for 1 year, but the reality is most people that ever started with our program, they don't have to pay after a year, but they still stay because it has kind of become a community, right? Everybody can get their whole program, their whole portfolio together in a year. And what I always say is you go through the learning process in the first year, and then in the future, I'm still there. If you have some really weird situation or something you have never seen, you can obviously come back and say, hey, Axel, here's something that we never covered in our mentoring time. And I don't want to make a mistake. How do I handle this? And I'd say 90+% we can figure it out. So that's how you get into the program. What we also oftentimes do is I call that a discovery call. I tell people go to our website, ideawealthgrower.com and click on the button that says discovery call. So we can first have a conversation. You can ask me all the questions to find out, do we jive? Are we a good fit? Are we, because talking about it in a podcast is one thing, but everybody's situation is a little different, right?
So
And so,
different, right?
yeah, so we go through the person's individual situation, family situation, financial situation to say, okay, do you also have the minimum requirements? One thing that I can also, and I'm not saying this to brag, but if somebody says, well, this all sounds interesting, but I don't know if I want to join a pricey or relatively high ticket program, you can go to Amazon and literally just find the book Ideal Wealth Grower. And I wrote everything that we briefly discussed in the book. Now the book doesn't replace the mentoring program, but it's like what, $15 or something to kind of get a little deeper before you decide to really change all the things that influence your financial future. But then basically to your other part, examples of people, we have quite a few people who have good jobs. I call them Henrys, by the way. High earning, not rich yet, right? Henry.
Right.
So what they're looking for and what's basically the specialty in our program, because there are many, many programs out there, is they have a good job, they're high earning, their job is pretty demanding. A lot of hours go into the job and then the remaining hours go into the family. So they want investments that work pretty much like on autopilot.
Right.
And when you do this normally, like you could invest in an ETF or into a mutual fund or into like a real estate investment trust or stuff like that. The one thing that you're giving up for that freedom of automation is that you have no control.
Right.
Right? If you invest in an ETF, whatever the companies in the ETF do, you own part of it, but whatever they do, they do. Now, in our program, you are with your name or the name of your company on the title of every house. You are the owner.
You own the house.
You own the house, you own the title, and that means also you are in control. Now, what comes into mind for most people immediately when I say this is, well, if I'm in control, I have to look after everything. And this is the specialty that we have in our system. I developed for myself originally because I had just started a business. I didn't really have time to look after the houses that we would buy. So I wanted to find a way and make this as automatic as possible. And I found something that is still not very well known in general in public that is called turnkey providers.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So just real quick to explain what that means. A turnkey provider is a company that has basically three main pillars of their business. The first one is a renovation and construction company. So what do? They find houses that need to be renovated. They try to buy them as cheap as possible, renovate them, and then sell them to their clients. Or they have the construction arm. They buy a piece of land and build new houses on the piece of land for the sale to their clients. So that's construction and renovation. Then the second part of the turnkey provider is basically a real estate agency. They sell the houses that the construction company has built, but they also sell properties from the community, right? Like I have one
I see.
turnkey provider that has 1,000 units under management. So if any of their owners says, you know what, I want to sell this house because I want to do something for my grandma or whatever, then that real estate agency would also sell properties of the existing inventory to other investors in the community. So the second thing is the real estate agency. And the third pillar is property management. And the really important thing is that that all needs to be under one roof, under one company. Because
Right.
obviously you could go out and hire a property management company. You can obviously hire a real estate company. You can obviously hire a building contractor company. But what happens is you as the owner are always in what I say, sitting in between the chairs. Nobody wants
Right.
to take responsibility. If it's all under one roof, I can be sitting in San Diego and have 4 houses in Ohio, and the turnkey provider is managing them, offered them to me, I bought them from them, they renovated them, so it's all in one hand. So now
Right.
I, as the owner investor with my name or my company's name on the title, they do all the work. I really only have to talk to them once a month for about 30 minutes. And so my own example, and this is not just my example, we have clients, it's the same thing. You have ultimately what I call clusters. You have 4 or 5 houses in one location, 4 or 5 houses in the next location, 4 or 5 houses in the next location. So let's say my example, I have 3 different turnkey providers in 3 different locations. So every month I do 3 calls, about 30 minutes each. And that's all I do to manage my portfolio of 10 properties, an hour and a half per month. And so if you have a
Right.
high earning job or a stressful job, or you're starting a business like I did, yeah, an hour and a half or 2 hours a month is doable, right? And that's
Yeah.
why this
Very doable.
model of using turnkey providers is really a good model for this kind of
Model.
investing.
So if I may ask, after mentoring people in real estate investment or residential real estate, I believe you are doing it just in the area of residential real estate, right? Not in the business real estate. What do you wish more people understood before trying to invest? Like what the new investors often underestimate, or what mistakes do people make when they try to figure everything on their own? Like, in other words, why would they need their services?
Well, the first thing is, like in many, many industries, I would say, especially when it comes to any kind of service, you have a lot of people who offer the same kind of service. Let's say they call themselves turnkey provider, but not all of them are good turnkey providers. Or there are companies that call themselves turnkey providers, but they're only buying, selling, and managing. They're not renovating or constructing them. Or some of them, they're only renovating them and selling them, but they're not managing them. So number one would be you want to have a turnkey provider that really has all three pillars. But the other thing is you would, if you don't have somebody like me who has done this for now basically 15 years, and I know which ones are good ones and which ones are not good ones, that doesn't mean I know them all, but the ones that we work with, I know are good ones. So you're limiting your risk of trying to apply what we are suggesting on your own and running into one that's not a good one. And the problem oftentimes is it's kind of like you buy a used car, right? You really only find out all the things that they hidden from you after you actually start driving it for a while, and then all kinds of things happening. You don't see it when it's sitting on the lot or when you're riding around the block
Exactly.
for 5 minutes. So that's basically one of the things why it's higher risk. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but it's obviously a higher risk if you were to try to figure it out on your own. The other thing, and I just want people who listen to us or watch us in their mind, just go for a moment and think about something, some kind of thing that you would say you're really good at.
Right.
Like it could be playing an instrument or some craft or some topic that you're really, really interested in and have been studying for a very long time. So you're good at, you're really expert. And now imagine somebody who has never done that before, who comes to you and says, I'm going to catch up to you, no problem. In the reality, for anybody who knows you are really good at something, you're really an expert, you've really studied it, you have experienced it, you know to know what the good ones are and what the bad ones are. Anybody claiming it's easy to catch up to you and make up the 10, 15, 20 years of experience, you know that's very unrealistic, right? So that's the
Very
other part. The
unrealistic.
one thing is the risk. The other part is even if you're more efficient, and you could argue, okay, well, maybe if I use AI. Well, one of the
Right.
problems is that AI can take all the available, publicly available information and all the rules and the laws and the stuff like that. Well, guess what? I'm doing that too. But the thing that AI doesn't have is to know what combination of indications is a red flag, right? And so even if somebody were to say, okay, I just use AI and what I learn from reading your book and then I do it on my own, I'm always saying, be my guest, but don't come crying back to me when it doesn't work. Right. And that doesn't mean I'm bragging about it. I'm just saying you cannot
Exactly.
easily make up experience. That's just something that is very hard to make up.
Now, Doctor, with everything you are building through Ideal Wealth Grower, mentoring, educating, community books, and then investor guidance, what are you really focused on improving right now? Do you have something you're working on right now? Something that, and how long has that been, or what's making it a priority for you to work on something right now?
Well, one thing that I'm finding is that certain fundamentals in the context of wanting to build a residential real estate portfolio are coming up again and again and again, right? Like, what do you need to look for? What is the due diligence you should go to? How do you identify a good property versus not such a good property? What kind of tools can
Right.
you use to analyze after you, like I said earlier, right? Like you have decided you want to go to Miami. Okay, what are the things that you would have to look into for any property that you might consider in Miami? And what are the things that are different in Miami than any other place, right? Like, for example, flooding and groundwater levels is a specialty for Miami that you don't have in
Right.
Denver, Colorado or stuff, right? You're in the mountains and water just runs down the mountains and the groundwater level is wherever it is. In Miami, the groundwater is constantly coming up through the streets as soon as they
Right.
have a high flood or a hurricane coming or something like that. And that doesn't matter if you're buying an apartment on the 15th floor, but it matters if you have a house at sea level, right? So
Right.
I'm just giving a few examples. So fundamentally, Those are the things that you would basically want to know about. Some of them are the same. And so to answer your question, what am I working on or what would I like to try to be able to do is identify which things are repeating in the context of building a residential real estate portfolio with turnkey providers
Hmm.
and put that as content online so that
Hmm.
people can take that before they even have to enroll into the actual mentoring program, into the actual investing. Because I mean,
Okay, so
fundamentally,
is it
the better prepared you are, the faster you can actually get into buying properties.
okay? It's like providing more, like more education,
Yeah,
content creation, or
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about when it comes to ideal growth, ideal wealth grower in the next 6 to 12 months. Are you looking into reaching out more? What would it look? What would it make you look back and say this was a strong season for helping more people move towards economic independence? Do you have like a program you reach out or campaign style or lead generation? What exactly would you look back and say this was really a good 6 to 12 months program?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is coming on podcasts like yours.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's a way where people have a little bit more than just a little blurb on a social
See.
media thing or so to listen to. If you're asking
Mhm.
excellent questions, so I give hopefully meaningful answers that help people to
Right.
decide, okay, this makes sense and this is something I want to look into. So we have gotten a whole bunch of clients over the years that heard me the first time talking about what we're doing on a podcast. The other thing is to some extent social media, but mainly because they read something, like an article that I posted or something like that. And I would say after podcast, the number two is probably referrals, right? Somebody is
Right.
in the program or even finished our program. And I ask them, but oftentimes they also volunteer to say, you know what, here's another person that I told. And this is,
Referrals.
in a way, if you think about it, Hippolyte, it's the same thing that happened to me, right? I started talking
Right.
about what I'm doing, and then my friends and family and colleagues and stuff say, oh, can I do this too? Can you help me out? And
Right.
can you explain this
Right.
to me? And obviously, when a client of mine is in the program and they are getting ready to decide which location and which house and how much do we pay and do we get financing, sooner or later they're going to tell somebody about it, right? And I don't mean on social media, just when you're out or with colleagues, when somebody just asks you. And so referrals is probably, if I had to say, number one is podcast, number two is referrals, and number three is probably social media.
That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about technology. Where do you see technology making the biggest difference in real estate investing or mentorship?
Well, I think there are different steps coming and evolving. One
Right.
step that is already there that we're already seeing is that we're getting more and more sophisticated access to data to do
Right.
better analysis, right? Like
Right.
there's so much publicly available data and I can use AI tools, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or any of those, to say go out for this particular address and find out everything that might be valuable. Now, one thing that we do is we have developed more and more detailed checklists to say what are we actually looking for as due diligence for any property. So I can feed that into an AI and say, now I have an address, work off this checklist to find out everything you can according to this checklist for this address. And it
Right.
used to be much harder and it used to cost a lot of money and so forth. And nowadays the AI is very fast and very thorough. Now you still kind of want to verify. So we're also using some AI supported tools for calculations, for rent evaluations and stuff like that. But those get better and better. So the differences in the numbers that different tools generate are like a few dollars a month or so. It's not any kind of
Right.
substantial difference anymore. So that's already there. Then the other thing that's there is that there are more sophisticated ways to actually look at a property. But it used to be when I started investing in 2005 and then the following years until we started Idea Wealth Core, I had to visit every property, fly there, look at it, walk through it and stuff like that. Now you have drone footage, you have Google Maps, there are companies that offer you to go and visit the property for you with a camera
For
and you
you.
get like a video about everything from the actual property on that particular date and on and on and on. So that part is already getting better. The things that I think that are coming are the houses will have to be better prepared for new technologies. What I mean by that is be prepared for solar, be prepared for batteries in the garage, be prepared for individual room air conditioning instead of these big central air conditionings. Be prepared to have maybe something like a charging station for your robot, because people will have robots in the future.
Right.
Be also prepared that your property management is no longer, this is my big, 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 big hope, that they're no longer calling the plumber or some electrician or stuff like that that charges you $250 or $300 for every little screw that they drive into a wall, but that they will have their robot crew where the labor is so cheap. If you have that robot crew, like if a property management department in a turnkey provider gets 3, 4, 5 robots that are available 24/7, and they have learned all the things that any of
All
the
the
different trades, and a tenant calls and says, my faucet is dripping, my toilet is stuck, my lawn needs to be mowed, I have all kinds of leaves in the gutters and stuff. The robots are just get scheduled, they go out, it's day and night, it doesn't really matter as long as they don't have to get into the house. They can take care of everything. And what you're really ultimately paying is a tiny fee for the time, if at
yeah.
all, and then the parts. Right. So I think
I mean
property
that's
management, I'm still a little bit on the fence. I
yeah.
hope, if you ask me, Hippolyte, I hope that turnkey providers will be smart enough to take that on themselves
Hmm.
and then offer a much cheaper property management to the owners. But here's
Yeah. That's
an interesting thing. If they don't, I am personally convinced of that. And I know enough people, my own clients who have properties, and I also know a bunch of other people who just build their own portfolio in the same areas where I have properties. If the
right.
turnkey providers don't figure this out, then I'm sure I can in any town find a few other owners and say, hey guys, should we buy 1 or 2 or 3 robots and let them take care of our houses? And then we have
That's very few.
then we have an initial investment, but the same thing. Remember, our conversation today started with me saying, what is depreciation? Well, if you say a robot, let's say, has a 5-year time span, costs $30,000, that's $6,000 a year that we would write off, but also that would be our cost. And then in those 5 years, it goes out every day for 18 hours to take care of, I don't know, in 18 hours, you can probably take care of 15 properties, right? And then take that times 30. So that's, what is that? 30,
Yes, 50.
400 or so properties a month,
Yeah.
right? So
That's 450. 450.
yeah, 450. So imagine if I and some other owners, we put our stuff together, those robots can take care of hundreds of properties and then visit every property for an hour every month. So the quality that
I
you
mean
would,
that
yeah, I mean, imagine you would have somebody who takes care, does maintenance, mows the lawn, fixes anything that's wrong with the house every month. Those properties
that's
would be in excellent shape.
that's very that's very futuristic because this robot has dynamic skills. I believe there's something people they are already building something like that. But those ones I see they are more in the factories. They work in the factories, so in a specific location,
Yeah.
and they are trained within that location. So there's something
Yeah, that's true.
like that.
But if anybody who is listening or watching us wants to take a look, right, just to see where are we right now, there's a company
Yeah.
called Figure, like Figure. Figure. They have a robot called Figure 3. And when you look at the videos that they have on their website, they just finished a live stream for, I think, 200 hours of a robot sorting packages for Amazon. It sorted, I think, 200,000 packages or something like that before it finally, something broke and it needed to be
Yeah.
replaced.
Yeah.
Now, they
Replace.
also have videos on how their Figure 3 robots are actually refreshing a hotel room, like making the
Right.
beds, cleaning the sink, cleaning the carpets, vacuuming, all that kind of stuff. 2 robots working together, right? Now, are they doing it smoothly? Are they anywhere near as good as a really, practice made or stuff like that? No. But when
They're going to
anybody
start
says to
somewhere.
me, this is 15 years in the future, no, these things are already training on this stuff.
They are training themselves already.
Yeah. So I would say in 5 years, you and I will probably at least have the option to buy a robot. Now, if we
Yeah.
can afford it, I don't know if it's going to be super expensive. I don't know, but the technology is definitely coming. It's
No,
not as far in the
they,
future as a lot of
no,
people.
it's not far. They are currently training it. They are currently
Yeah,
training the technology.
exactly.
So, but in that same light, so if, let's say, if you want to remove something that is repetitive, right? Let's say you have, as there's something that's repetitive in within ideal worth growth grower, what would that thing be that you want to take off? Like maybe remove, like something you do every day and becomes repetitive. If you could remove that repetitive or low level task from your weekly workload, what would it be?
Well, in idea-based grower, we don't necessarily have those kind of highly repetitive tasks, but what we do
Right.
have is monitoring and checking in for certain stuff, where you have an activity that repeats every month, for example, or across a month, not all on one day, but across several dates across a month. And as an owner, and it's not just me, any owner would really only be interested in the result. I don't need to I don't want to do the steps. I don't want to
That's
gather all the data and stuff. If I had
you
some
want to do
way,
so.
some AI tool that at the end of
Mhm.
every month, before I talk to my turnkey provider, like I mentioned earlier, I have a beautiful report gathered already together with all the information. That's one thing. Right. The same thing is like I give you one example that I'm struggling with right now. I have my own podcast and we're finishing out what we call season 5 of that podcast in 2 weeks. And
Right.
I want to thank everybody who was a guest. Now I have to literally go in manually and figure out one by one who were the guests at which date and what were their emails and what were their websites and stuff. That's a perfect task for an AI, right?
Right.
And these kind of things, there's more stuff like that. I think another one, and every small business owner struggles with that, is having to pay like some tax person to prepare your taxes. And for that to be able for them to prepare your taxes, you have to gather all the data. I think an AI, I hope it exists soon if it doesn't already
Yeah.
exist.
I mean, most of what you're saying when it comes to, I think there are tools available. What I think your concern is about integration. There are already tools available that are moving very fast in that direction and
Yeah, but
shouldn't be long.
there's a caveat here. A lot of the tools, and this is you will see the similarity. I
Right.
said earlier, why do we do residential real estate investing using turnkey providers is control. And a
Mhm.
similar concept like control is privacy. Right?
Right.
Yes, I can give H&R Block or Rocket Mortgage or whatever these companies, Intuit, QuickBooks and so forth. I can use their tools, but in return, I have to open absolutely everything on my privacy. They will
Yeah.
know they have access to my credit cards, to my bank accounts, to my transactions, to my invoices, blah, 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 blah. And I don't like that, right? Because I cannot control what happens afterwards with my data. Now, if you
Right.
turn this around and say, okay, I have, for example, a robot and that's my robot, I can determine, at least I have the vision that I can determine which data will be shared through the internet and which data remains private. And the data that remains private is still in such a way that I can ask my robot every week or every day or every month, where are we with taxes? Where are we with expenses? Where are we with income? And on and on and on, without having to
Mm.
share this to some external entity. It's the same thing. Like I could invest in real estate investment trust and I hope that they meet their commitment. But if they don't, I have
Right.
no recourse. That's the difference, right? I think that's also the difference of being in control of your AI or just using ChatGPT and you never know what happens with your data.
Right. Wow. So let's say, where can people learn more about you, your book, your podcast, or your ideal worth grow up? How many people are on your team? Are you working alone? You have a team?
Yeah, we have a team,
How?
about 10 people right now.
Okay.
It fluctuates a little bit depending on which kind of projects we have. And, if we need somebody extra, we bring in some. Most people are not employees. They're kind of more like freelancers, but most of them work for years already. So it's not really the typical, you come in for a
Uh,
month or so and then you go again. Yeah, so we have a team for different tasks. The place to go is ideawealthgrower.com. I mentioned already at the homepage at the top right-hand corner is a button that says Discovery Call. You can also just put either my name, Axel Mayhover, or Idea Wealth Grower on Google or any kind of search engine, and you will find us, including podcasts and what have you. But the website is typically the easiest way. And I also feel, when people ask me, how would you describe your business? I would say I have basically a boutique business. It is currently
Right.
not for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. It's for somebody who says, okay, I really want to add something to my investing portfolio that generates income on a monthly basis and that is inflation protected, which real estate is. And so for that particular purpose, I do this and I basically take you by the hand and I take you through the program. It's not right now a course or something that you sit in front of a computer forever, but to find out, do you want this or don't you want this? I still very strongly believe you need to talk to each other for a little bit, get to
Right.
know each other, just like you and I are doing today. And then you can say, yeah, I like this guy. I like the ideas. I think this
Yeah.
person can actually understand what I'm looking for. And then we work together. Or you say, well, I really want to have a laundromat or a car wash or
Mm.
commercial real estate or something else. And then I'm not the guy.
Wow, that's good. That makes a lot of sense. So, well, Dr. Axel, thank you for joining me on the Smart Office podcast. I really appreciate your insight on residential real estate, passive income, time freedom, helping people build a more independent financial wealth. For those who are listening, you can always reach out to Dr. Axel on the Ideal Wealth Grower website. You could Google that as well, reach out to, and there's a lot of information being shared. Thank you again once more. Thanks for coming to the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me, Polite.